In this video, we're going to use test-driven development to drive out the implementation of a small application. Hi, I'm Mark Bradley and welcome to Testing All the Things, a screencast in which we use live coding to demonstrate different types of testing tools and techniques. In the next few videos, we're going to create a small RESTful API. We're going to use end-to-end integration and unit tests to complete the implementation. Let's look at the code. Before we started recording, I set up the basics of our project. I've created a Docker file which brings in all of the source code and builds the application ready to run. I've got a test stage which currently doesn't contain anything special, and there's also a production stage if we wanted to push to production. I've also created a very simple main which just instantiates the Gorilla Mux router and starts a HTTP server running. Also brought in a small placeholder test which allows me to check that all of my setup work correctly. Now let's look at how I'm going to run tests for this project. I've created a simple makefile and I've got a target called test. This first of all builds the Docker container here to the test target. Then it uses Docker Compose to bring up the service, and then it execs go test across all of my files, and then finally it brings my Docker container down again. So let's make sure all this runs nicely before we start writing any code. I will speed through running make test so you don't have to sit and watch it. As you can see, it built correctly, it brought up our service, it ran our one test really quickly, and then it's brought down the Docker container again. Now that we know this is all set up ready to start, let's start adding our first test. We can close the makefile. Let's move our main over to the right hand side, and we'll keep our test open. For this application, the first piece of functionality we want to add is a healthcheck endpoint, so that we can check that our service is up and healthy at any time. So let's change our placeholder test to be test happy health check. With the end-to-end test of an API, we want to interact with the API as if we're one of its consumers. And that's what we're going to do within our test. We are going to use Go's HTTP client to make a call to the healthcheck endpoint, and then we're going to look at the response and ensure that it responds with the values we expect. So let's make a start by creating a HTTP client. There we go. Next thing we want to do is make a call to our healthcheck endpoint. C dot, and it will be a get call. We need to provide the URL. Because when we run this, we'll be inside the Docker container. We can call localhost, HTTP, localhost, and we know that our server runs on port 8080, so port 8080, like so. And now we need to specify the URI we want to hit for this test, and in this case it's healthcheck. We are hitting this API as we would if we were consuming it from the outside. So now we can get the response, and the get call also returns an error, which, because this is a test, we're just going to assume never happens, so we're just going to ignore it. There we go. Let's type that up. And now we need to start ensuring that our API works as we expect. The first thing we want to do is ensure we get the right HTTP status code returned. So if we do so we're using Testify, so we'll use its assertion library. So s dot equal, and we give the expected, so we expect HTTP status OK. For the response is status code. So that's a good first start. We know that we've successfully hit the right endpoint and it's saying it's healthy. But we also want to look at the body that gets returned. So we will add another assertion. So s dot. Now we could use equal, but we also have this JSON equal, which takes a string. So that makes our life a little easier. So we'll use JSON equal, and we're going to say that the JSON we want returned would be something along the lines of status is string OK, and we want what do we want? Messages, say, and for now there's no messages, so we're just going to return an empty array. So that's the expected JSON we want returned, and now we can get the body of our response, so which is our read all r dot body. Okay, and this also returns an error, but the error is never going to happen, so we'll just return like so. And now we can just pass in string our byte array. Okay, there we go. So that is our test all set up. We are going to, from the outside of the application, with no knowledge of what happens inside, just make a call to one of the API endpoints we expect to exist. We're going to say that when we call this, we expect it to return status 200, OK. And the body that we expect to return should return status of OK with messages spelled correctly, which will just return, for now, an empty array. So we're going to save that. And now we can run our tests. So bring up our terminal, run make test. We sped through the run, but we'll look at the assertions now. So we expected 200, but we got a 404, and we didn't get any valid JSON back to do a comparison with. Let's start by solving the first of our problems, and then we'll look at the second one. So the first one is we got a 404 back when we're expecting a 200. Well, if we look over here on the right hand side, our router doesn't handle any routes, so let's set up a route for ourselves. So r dot handle func. So it takes a string, and it's going to be health check and a func, and there we go. And we'll just say it r w and r. There we go. Okay, let's just tidy this up a little bit so it is all readable. There we go. We want a 200 back, so with our response writer we can just say that the status code is http.status OK. Okay, so we'll rerun our tests and we'll see where we're at. So our 404 error has gone away, and we're just left with this invalid JSON. We could solve this by just returning some hard-coded values. So let's do that to make sure this goes away. Make this go away. So w dot write byte array string. We can just copy and paste this. There we are. Now if we run our test again, and there we have it. Our tests have gone back to green. We have written our happy health check test as if we were a consumer of our API, having no knowledge of the internals other than it has this health check endpoint. When it's working, it returns a status of 200, and it returns a body saying the status is OK and an empty messages array. And for end-to-end tests of a API, this is kind of the simplest it can get, because we don't have to interact with a database or anything. We don't have to do any real setup before we run our tests. We just make the call to the endpoint, and check our assertions. At this point, looking over our main, we have our entire application in a single function, which is probably not where we want to be, but the code we've written, or the test we've written, is now passing. So for now, there's only one real refactor I want to make to this code during this video, and I'm not really overly keen on this hard-coded response string. I want to use some more of the features of Go to do this, so I don't have to just have this hard-coded string. So we're going to make those changes. And we're going to keep in the single file for now. So we will go type is health, and we go status is a string, and we can use JSON status, and messages is a string. So, and again we'll use the JSON tag. Messages, yep, excellent. Now we can this. Now we need to use our struct. So H is a new health. I want to fill all fields, and we're going to say OK. Now we want this to be an empty string, like so. Okay, and we're not using health yet, so we need to do JSON.Marshal the H. Okay, and we want the body. For now, again, we're just going to ignore the error. We haven't got a test that's going to look at it, so we can ignore it. So this is now an array of bytes which can go straight into the write function. So let's run that and see where we're at. And our test is still passing. So we've made that small refactor to remove the hard-coded string and make use of a struct with the JSON annotation to set it up, going through JSON Marshal and returning it. That's where we're going to leave this application for today. So let's have a look at what we've done. We've added our single test to check that the health check endpoint returns the status code we expect and returns the body we expect. Currently, within our main function, we now set up the router. We handle one route, being our health check, and when you call it, we create a quick health check, marshal it into JSON, return it, and set the status OK. Now at this point, the code is really small and quite neat. But obviously, as we add functionality to our API, we're not going to want to have everything sitting in main. And what we're going to do throughout the next few videos is add features to our API. And we will refactor the application into something that works and looks neater and will not consist of just one large main function. In the next video, we'll start looking at end-to-end tests that involve a database, integration tests to ensure we can talk to that database correctly when we need to, and we'll add some unit tests to look at tying the pieces of the application together and ensuring they're going to work as we expect. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Testing All the Things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please rate and review the video and subscribe to the channel. If you did not and you have any feedback, please leave a comment in the comment section of the video or contact me on Twitter @Bradle.